name is Sokari Douglas Camp, and I'm from Nigeria, but I live in London, and so now I'm from London. I originally came from the Niger Delta in Nigeria. I was born in a little town called Buguma City, and it's part of a series of islands in the Niger Delta. 22 islands altogether. Kalabari people, this is what I am, live on these 22 islands in Nigeria. The Delta was a wonderful place to be born. It was one of the most beautiful places in the world. We didn't have any cars. We had sand and muddy kind of banks that had oysters on mangrove roots, and very, very dark green water, but the mangrove roots were very, very white. And as you went up to the mangrove roots in a boat, you had clusters of oysters on these mangrove roots in the water. So it was idyllic and really beautiful and lush. I got into art because I was just born with a hunger for doing art. I mean, as a child in the Delta, I'd draw in sand. We used to have drawing competitions. That was just something that you did, and not having paper or paints or whatever, it was easy to kind of smooth down the sand and then draw a picture. And my brother-in-law, who was married to my sister, came from an artistic family. He gave me my first set of paints, and I loved painting up till the age of about 12, and then I decided it really wasn't my bag because I couldn't get my hand into it, I really wanted to get involved with it. And also I had a thing about perspective, it was too logical for me actually, and my mother put a spanner in the works by looking at a photograph and saying, "Who's that midget at the back?" Because she couldn't understand perspective. So I became very aware of different concepts and different ways of perceiving things quite early on. Why couldn't my mother figure out that that wasn't a midget, but someone in the distance and all of that? And I thought, well, does it matter? I mean, things can be patterns on a flat plane too. There are different ways of telling stories, and my mother was quite a storyteller. And when I went to Central School of Art, as it was known then, it's now Central St. Martin's, I had amazing teachers, guys that said, if you're not inspired by what's in Holborn, it's perfectly all right, Sokari, if you want to talk about masquerades rather than, popping up in the tube, it's fine, why don't you tell us about that? And masquerades had played quite a big role in my life in the Delta, just because it was always very exciting. It was a bit like Christmas here, except spirits came out to play rather than unwrapping a present, and these spirits came out at different times of the year in the Delta, rather like, having the seasons of, Easter, all the Saints' Days or whatever. We have Saints' Days, but they're masquerades. And they're spiritual figures that women supposedly first spotted in the Delta. And when men dress up in these costumes, they transform their bodies. They make themselves, kind of pregnant. They have, tails or things that look like erections, so they look multi-sexed, and they have headdresses and things that are also pretty terrific, because they change the proportions of the human body, because that whatever headdress they have is on top of the head, so you don't have the head in the usual position for shape of a man. And I found the way the proportions change and things really interesting. And so I picked some of these elements as an artist starting up in Holborn, and I loved movement. I loved using machines in my work, just because Kalabari people, when they do something tremendous in the arena or get to the height of their performance, they bend down and shake their bottoms. Which almost looks like a chicken kind of bathing in sand to get fleas off or something, but it is the most extraordinary. And these women, when they dance this particular step, totter as they do it, so it seems as if they aren't on level ground, which seems very kind of sympathetic to being Kalabari anyway, just because we're water folk, you know. Our main form of transport was on water, you know, so it has an element of that. And I used to make structures with a motor on, and by talking to the technicians at college, they said by making the motor swivel round in a weighed, uneven way, just by attaching a weight to a motor in a structure, you automatically make it shake. You know, it's a bit like, I don't know, car engine not being screwed down properly, your car would shake in a terrible way, you know, and I suppose it's from the era of fan belts and stuff like that. So I used to go along to shops that had little motors, and I'd connect these things up to batteries or electricity and add weights and levers and things that would bang stuff. And my motors were in structures that were welded, and that's how I started welding. Anyway, so I use bits of Kalabari, this and that, to have a conversation all the time, and I'm not quite sure why, except that, you know, I'm bilingual, and you know, some bits of Kalabari express more than English does. So my Kalabari conversation happens all the time. Oil in the Niger Delta. Wow, what can you say? There are lots of different peoples in the Niger Delta, and their upkeep has been totally destroyed because their environment has been destroyed. They can't fish, they can't farm their land. The Ogoni have problems, Kalabari people have problems, and there's over 300 languages in Nigeria, and I think most of the languages are in the south. There's just lots of different people that speak different languages and can't really communicate together to manage the governance of the country in a sustainable way. And in 2005, I came across Platform, an organisation that are very environmentally conscious. They're environmental activists, and these people wanted to make some sort of commemoration for Ken Sara-Wiwa, because a lot of the people in the organisation were writers, artists, and they admired Ken for his work and couldn't understand why no one was making more noise about what had happened to Ken's people, the Ogoni. And Ken wasn't the only person killed. There were 8 other people hung at the same time, but people know about Ken Sara-Wiwa's death because he was such a name, but the other people that were killed as well were doctors and lawyers, and they couldn't have all arranged for the murders that they were supposed to be killed for. They couldn't have all killed the Ogoni 4 that were killed. Anyway, apart from the politics of all of that, it's the fact that the environment has been messed up in the Delta. And I took part in a competition to make a memorial for Ken Sara-Wiwa, and I won it. For once I won a competition, and my work was quite simple. It was going to be a piece that was like a campaign bus, the sort of bus that Obama and Cameron and everybody uses in Western countries to travel around the country to meet the people, to campaign about their policies for winning elections, and I thought that a structure like this, a campaign bus of some kind, would be good. And people say, oh, I was inspired by Nigerian buses or whatever to make this kind of bus, but it's also the flavour of Africa and the West mixed in there, and it looks like a sort of Mad Max bus, but the importance of it is that it has these campaigning words around it that Ken said in one of his last interviews. He said, I accuse the oil companies of practicing genocide against the Ogoni, which is a tough thing to say, and but I felt that it was so important to state that. So it was a kind of information vehicle, a bit like, I wanted something that could park up anywhere, a bit like a library bus, a bus full of information. And Platform have used it for performances, film shows, all sorts. So it's been quite a practical vehicle. I was lucky it was accepted, and has been working in a sense for the Commission's Platform. The art world and how it responds to me, I really don't know how my work is responded to. I came at things in an upside down way. I started conversations in museums rather than in art galleries. And why did I fall into that bag? I fell into that bag because of the conversations that, a mask isn't the whole story. There's costume, dance, rhythm, whatever, and to bring that kind of excitement into a dusty museum was quite a good idea in the 80s, the late 80s. And, I was quite happy with doing that because of my interest in movement and things that we spoke about before. But, recently people have got terribly excited that they've discovered African artists. And, what's extraordinary is that we've been here for a long time. And I didn't realise that it was African art, just because, in Nigeria, throughout my life, people would say that they were from a certain tribe or whatever. We didn't even see ourselves as a nation, let alone this big Africa thing that is thrown at you here. But there's a lot of influence to play with out there, and that's what's exciting. And the more people experiment and converse about cultural experiences and things, the better, really. Just because it's not only in the world isn't just in the European navel, is it? I mean, it's bigger than that, and there's just so many conversations to be had. I think that with this African blanket, I just hope they don't make it as dull as some of the things in Europe, because we've got so much to talk about still. There's a lot of things to talk about out there that have nothing to do with European history. But being in London, I'm also classed as a sort of black person, and this black person got involved with the abolition of slavery, which was kind of celebrated because there was a bill by Wilberforce in 2007, and there were art competitions, exhibitions, and all sorts. And I came up with an idea better than anything I'd thought of in years. So I thought, well, I will spend some time making these sculptures, which are now called, the piece is called All the World is Now Richer. And I spent about a year making these pieces and talking and trying to campaign for them to be put on the embankment. And I managed to get Southwark Council to put one of the works outside the Mayor's office, and the piece was turned into bronze, and my words were put into terrazzo, and the wording was cut out of stainless steel, and it was turned into a permanent piece, and it's owned by Southwark Council. And it's a prototype of how all the other figures could look. So what do? I mean, I've spent time getting the works to tour for a year, and they were in St. Paul's for 6 months nearly, so they've toured for longer than a year. The idea is that, living here, you suddenly are informed, or you get to know that, with the money from slavery, people built the city of London, Bristol, Liverpool, and I just feel that, if I had a sculpture like All the World Is Now Richer in the general environment, it would remind people of this part of our mutual history, where, black folk ought to be admired for surviving what they did, just because the Atlantic slave trade was incredible, totally incredible. How did they survive? We have to salute these people because it's a way of saluting ourselves. Why is what I do important? To me, it's important to me just because it's amazing therapy. That's number one. Number two, it's that I feel that when I read books and I'm able to get into the world of the writer and the world of the story, it's pretty fantastic, and that's what being, a human being is all about, thought and conversation and contact. So I do hope that, people will look at every world or whatever and fantasize about, what I've done, just because we all have hands and we all have means and ways to do things. It crosses the barrier of, literature. You can look at all the different ways things are put together, and then not only the way they're put together, but you also have a picture that is created by, supposedly what I've done, and I'm always trying to better the picture, actually, trying to make a better picture. It's like sort of trying to write a book. So I'm always writing some kind of little story. Some people can tell stories just with their words. Some people music, some people by carving a piece of wood or whatever. It's about contact, actually, and it's about recording that you've been here.